Connie Lewis and her husband Nick here have been championing the emergency preparedness group, and they held or put together a first responder tour. During that, we met Amanda, and she offered to give us this training on protecting our places, how we get them a little bit more fire safe, which is really a challenge when you live in the middle of a forest. So any help that we can get, we truly appreciate, and it's really nice to see everybody here. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to you guys.
I'm Connie. This is Scott Curdy, our manager here, and Dan is here with as the president of the board. So we expect lots of questions, and I'm just going to turn it over to Amanda. And Amanda, you can decide if you want questions held or in between. It's up to you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. If I start to talk too quiet, just let me know. It's hard for me to talk loud. But you can feel free to ask questions throughout. If anything pops up, just shout it out, and we will go from there. So just a little background. So I work for Whatcom and Skagit Conservation Districts. We basically help landowners and property owners with their natural resource goals. And then for me, I do wildfire education, so I work throughout the counties helping homeowners and property owners evaluate and mitigate fire risk. So I just want to start with a little background. So this is the Washington Department of Natural Resources Wildland Urban Interface Map. It is not a fire risk map, but it provides good context. So basically we have the community here, and it's classified as intermix, which basically means you live in the forest, which means that there are fuels that can burn, which I'm sure you all already knew that. All right. See if this is better. So why do we care? We know that wildfire risk is increasing in Western Washington. So I'm sure you guys have noticed over the past few years, things like increasing air temperature, less summer rain, and earlier snowmelt, all which are leading to drier fuels and drier forest. So it's really great that you guys are interested in learning how you can reduce your risk. So when we think about how a home or a structure ignites from a fire, there's really three main potential ignition sources. So the first is surface fires. So a home could ignite if you have flame contact. So fires that's moving along the ground, consuming things like needles, any type of litter, small plants, and small trees. And then we have crown fires, which is really extreme fire behavior. A lot of folks think that most homes burn down due to like a wall of flames coming at the house. That's actually not true. But crown fires can move. They move through the tree canopies, and the radiant heat can ignite a structure up to 100 feet away. But really, embers. So the burning pieces of airborne material, this is the #1 cause of home destruction from wildfires. So embers can move ahead of the fire. They land on, debris in the gutters. They land on a nice dry plant. That catches fire close to your home, and then that can ignite your home. So really what we think about when we're going through what you can do is kind of how do we take away fuel so that embers don't have somewhere to land and ignite. Oh, that. And so there was a Forest Service researcher, and there's like a insurance researcher, and they did all this research to figure out how a home ignites. And what they found was that the condition of the home plus the first 100 feet really determines whether or not a home ignites during a wildfire. So they call this zone the home ignition zone, and this is the area we focus on. And I know the lots here don't go to 100 feet, so we're going to kind of talk about the things that are more applicable to your lots. But just keep in mind, the focus is really on that first 100 feet. And again, this is how it's broken down. So you have the home plus the first 5 feet, then you have 5 to 30 feet out and 30 to 100 feet out. But we're gonna mostly focus on these closer areas for you guys here. But if like your full-time residence is also in a forested area or an area that may be prone to wildfire, you can take these same things and apply them to your home. So we'll start with the immediate zone. So this is the home itself, plus the first 5 feet. Let's see here. So one thing, when I was looking at more like RV or the permanent RV structure type communities, a lot of fires started actually in the RV itself from lack of regular maintenance. So you want to make sure, even if you're using your RV as a permanent structure, that you're regularly maintaining kind of like the living quarters as well as any type of like electrical engine area, because what they found is some forest fires started from RVs catching on fire, moving into the local area around it, and then other RVs catching, since you are in these kind of cluster groups. And then when we think about your structures, so something that's pretty simple, keeping your roof clean. If you have gutters, keeping those clean. These are just really great areas of light, flashy fuel for an ember to land and catch fire. And if you also think about it, the areas that litter and debris collects on your roof are the same areas that an ember would kind of land and collect. So it's a really simple way, you know, as we're moving into the hot, dry season, if you're able to get up on your roof and clean off the debris, that's a really great start. And then ideally, you don't have branches that are overhanging or touching the roof. I know that that's probably a challenge for folks here. So if you're able to at least prune the branches up a little bit so that they're not touching the roof, or if you're able to prune them back a little bit. Anything I tell you is kind of like the by the book recommendation, but you can kind of, there's wiggle room. So doing something is better than doing nothing. So yeah, but the main thing with the roof is keeping it clean of debris. And then this is actually, it's from a different community, kind of like yours up in Whatcom, but the structures that you guys have over the RVs, there's a lot of like little nooks and crannies where like birds build nests or just debris can build up. And those are also places that you want to keep clean of debris. So just, you know, you can see here, there's like, and then there's spaces above. So just keeping that area clear, again, it's really like nice dry fuel for an ember to land on, and then it's burning the bird's nest, which is then burning on wood, burning close to your structure.
After the chicks have hatched.
Yeah, or you know, you could safely remove them. But yeah. So this is obviously on actual like permanent homes, but walking around with Connie earlier, I did see some folks had vents. So on homes, normally there's a metal mesh screening behind all vents, and it's 1/4 inch. And what that does is, or it's 1/4 inch, and they recommend that you change that to 1/8 inch, so the smaller mesh screen size. The idea is that as the home is drawing in air, it could also draw in embers. So if you have a smaller mesh screen size, that's going to prevent more from coming in. And you can literally just, like if you have the vents under your eaves or like on the upper vents, you can just screen over any of those vents with the smaller metal mesh screening. Decks. So like your roof, you want to keep your deck clean of debris, especially where the deck, like the wood deck meets the siding, and especially if you have flammable wood siding. And one thing that you can do if you have both flammable wood deck and flammable siding is install a metal flashing here. The idea is that you're trying to create a break in the fuel. So just installing a piece of metal flashing gives it so it's not wood on wood contact. And then firewood. This one's really tricky. So the by the book answer, or the by the book recommendation, is that it's stored at least 30 feet away from your structures. I know that's not really possible here. So options are that you have them as far away from your structures as possible. You can build like an enclosed container. That way, you know, if there were a fire, again, you're trying to prevent embers from getting into the stack of wood. But I definitely don't recommend keeping them right by your door or like right under a window. And so as we move again into summer, make sure that you're not keeping firewood right next to the home. And ideally not under decks as well. But I think I have a slide on that. And then if you happen to be changing your patio furniture at some point in the future, opting for non-flammable furniture. There's tons of options now. That is one thing that people, it's recommended that you try to move away from. There have been homes that have ignited because the wicker bench on the front porch caught fire, and then that started the, you know, that started the fire on the actual home. And then, you know, if you're gonna be gone for a long time, say September, it's still really hot and dry, we recommend that you kind of think about the outdoor patio furniture, outdoor like planters, decorations, anything that's flammable and right next to your structure. If you're gonna be gone a long time during fire season, either pulling those away from the home or even just putting them inside. Just because, like I said, homes have burned down from, you know, an ember landing on the furniture, on a cushion, or like in a big planter. And those maybe are right by a window, and the window breaks. So just something to keep in mind. If you're gonna be gone for a long time, you're not gonna be up here. Think about kind of what you can do and what you can move around so that you're taking away some ember opportunities. Okay, and then, so the by the book recommendation is that the first 5 feet from your structure, around your structure, is completely non-flammable. So some people will like do, you know, gravel around the first 5 feet and then have their plants. But again, with the small lots, that's pretty hard. So my main recommendation with that is if you have vegetation growing right next to your structure, and especially if it's like touching the 2x4 or like any of the wood beams, that you're pruning that back. So giving yourself a little bit of space between the vegetation you have and the structure. That's what I say the first step is. If it's, you know, if the plants are in your lot and you're able to prune them, that's kind of the recommendation for, you know, you don't have to completely remove everything, but at least try to prune it back and take away some of the vegetation that's right next to the home.
Question?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's for you or for Dan and them, but if we're right on the side where the green belt is, then are we supposed to prune those trees? Or are you guys supposed to prune them? What are we supposed to do? Like if we have trees right between lots, is that our responsibility to prune them, or is Tyee gonna do that?
Well, I guess this is gonna depend on where your property line is.
Okay.
If it's inside your property line, then go for it. If
Okay.
it's outside your property line, then, yeah, probably come into the office and fill out a work order. It may be that Tyee needs to deal with it,
Okay.
but,
In most cases, what we will tell you is, as long as, if it's just pruning them back, go for it.
That's like I figured.
If it's gonna
Not a
be,
check.
yeah, if it's gonna be, you know, clearing out all the green space between you and your neighbor,
Right.
we probably ought to talk about that.
Okay.
All right. So moving out, this is kind of, you know, this is, you guys, the 50-foot lots, you don't have a lot of space for vegetation, but I want to talk about it anyways. So after the first 5 feet, the next section is 5 to 30 feet out. And the priority in this area is to just break up fuels. So we have fuels, you can have continuous fuels both horizontally and vertically, and so we just want to find ways to break it up. And so when we think about continuous horizontal fuels, here's an example from a home, but like, you know, this is bigger than it looks in the picture, but if we have a continuous fuel like this right in front of a structure, we want to break it up. And so we could take out some of these plants, keep some of them. If you have arborvitae or juniper right next to your structure, I actually recommend just taking it out. Those plants hold a lot of dead material right inside of them. They burn really hot. But yeah, so breaking up fuels horizontally, for folks who have like walkways, or you have like patios that are like paved, or you have gravel, that's great ways to break up your fuels horizontally. And then vertically, we're really just looking for ladder fuels. And I know probably for a lot of you, this is probably gonna be maybe on your lot, but also maybe in the green space. But ladder fuels are any fuels that allow the fire to move from the ground into the tree canopies. So a lot of times in our area, it looks something like this. So we have, you know, low-hanging cedar branches and brush underneath, and it's this connection that we're trying to take away. So you can either prune up the cedar branches, prune back the shrubs, do a little bit of both. But when we're thinking about fuels, we're really just trying to disconnect them. And the ladder fuels, I always say prioritize the ladder fuels, especially those that if they lead directly into a tree that is overhanging your house or right next to your house. Like that should be the priority. So walk around your house and see, do I have any connection of vegetation from the ground into trees that are really close to the home? And that would be where you want to start. Let's see. Oh, yep, and I say that right there. So focus on the fuels that connect vegetation to your structures. And then if you're gonna be taking out plants and then maybe putting in new plants, I just always recommend native plants. They're locally adapted. They tend to be less flammable, and they're, you know, they tend to be less flammable. And then just this is more for information since you guys don't have huge lots here, but you know, fire-resistant plants tend to have higher moisture content in their leaves. They don't have that big buildup of dead vegetation. They're more resistant to drought, and they have, you know, low compact growth forms. So if you want plants around your home, things like, you know, succulents are a great option, or these like ground covers. They're less brushy and bushy, so they won't burn as hot and for as long. Because we say fire-resistant plants, but no plant is actually fire-resistant. Everything will burn if it's hot and dry enough, and we have, you know, in the past had hot, dry periods long enough where most vegetation would burn if a fire started. And then just the flip side, you know, flammable plants, they tend to be more water stressed. They accumulate dry and dead material. So like I said, these two are really common in our area, and they hold a lot of dead vegetation in the middle, and they're very flammable. And they often have high resin or oil content as well. So this doesn't apply directly to your lots here, but one thing I've seen in other communities, I haven't seen it here, which is really great, but in other communities like this, people will clean up their own lot, but then they will dump their materials in the common space, which is not great, because now you just have a huge pile of fuel right next to your structures. So in areas outside your lots, or if you're cleaning up your lot, just keep in mind, large piles of slash and debris are flammable. Don't dump them in the green spaces. And then I would just say, if you're walking around and you see any like really unhealthy stands in green spaces, if you see like dead standing trees, maybe that's something that you come in and let the folks know about, because that is one thing that we look for in that first 100 feet around houses. We don't really want, dead standing fuel or any big slash piles. So I would just say, like, as you guys are out and about, if you see something like that, that would be something I'd let the folks know about. And then, let's see here. And then since you guys, oh, yep. Yeah.
With the slash pile, they can spontaneously combust, right?
If it's hot enough.
Any type of compost pile.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about that here, but like, could it happen? Yes. And then I say talk to your neighbors. You guys, since you guys live close to each other, if a whole cluster of you is doing work, then that's going to better protect your area. And maybe you have some shared space that you both utilize. So talking to them is great. Getting everybody else on board, because as you work through the community, or as everybody in the community kind of does work, it makes the community better. And that's kind of it. I went through that fast, and I do have a couple of notes from Connie and I walked around a little bit beforehand. So one thing that I saw was, I know it's really convenient to store things under your decks, like wood, like building materials. It's not ideal because you have really nice dry material under your deck, because the deck is, providing cover, and then that's under a wood deck, which is flammable. So I would say, because you guys don't have big lots here, if you're gonna store things under your deck, you could consider screening them in, so like that really small mesh screen that they use on vents to prevent embers from coming in. You could also screen the decks in. It's not, foolproof, but it would be an option for being able to still store things, but preventing embers from getting in. And then there was one other thing I thought I saw. I don't quite remember. I think the other thing was really just taking a lap around and looking for any nooks and crannies you guys have, especially because there's lots of like little storage sheds. So just kind of keeping an eye out. I saw lots of bird's nest in places. When you have the gap between like your RV and the roof, keeping an eye out that the roof of your RV is actually staying clean as well. I wouldn't assume that a lot of material would get sucked up under there, but it's really just for you guys, the smaller lots, it's really just focusing on the home in the first 5 feet. If you can work in that area, I think you can have, you can like make a pretty good improvement, and then keeping an eye out on the other things in the green spaces, so that, if you've got dead standing trees, then that would be something that you'd want to get taken care of. Yeah.